We're back on Leading Edge. She is Mia Lewis, Associate Director of Common Cause Ohio, fighting the battle for fairer representation in the U.S. House of Representatives. Didn't work that well when we tried to redraw state legislative districts. That one's in court. I'm wondering, Mia Lewis, if we're not asking politicians to do something that we'd rather be apolitical, aren't we? I mean, can you imagine the heat that Republican lawmakers would take by whittling their already gerrymandered majority, which is 12-4 in the U.S. House? Now we're going to have 15 seats down to, let's say, 9-6, which would much more closely resemble 55-45. It even gives them a little extra boost there. Wouldn't they just be tarred and feathered and run out of town?
Well, there's several parts of your question. So first of all, apparently, yes, we are asking too much of them because they are failing miserably at being able to follow the law that as it is now in the Ohio Constitution. I think the idea was kind of good neighbors, good fences make good neighbors. So let's put some guardrails up, let's put some rules, and then they'll follow the rules and they will be required to make fair districts. So it won't be on them, it'll be on the law. But apparently that, when faced with a situation where they would have to, in fact, reduce the number of congressional seats that they have, their decision is, in fact, just not to follow the law instead of doing that. It is very difficult. But what you're saying is, if someone has taken something that doesn't belong to them, and then you ask them to give it back, it's difficult for them to give it back. Well, yes. But if it doesn't belong to them,
it's still the right thing to do.
It's still the right thing to do.
And then all we have to do, Mia Lewis, is look at Washington and the goings on right now, infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better debate going on. And I just want to stress this because all of this is important. This is happening right now, folks, right now in Columbus. And as she's going to tell us the rest of this month, we're up against the November 30th deadline. This is important because these are the seats we're going to be voting on in the midterms next year. And we already see margins that are just razor thin in Washington right now. Do I have it right?
Yep, absolutely. And, some of the way these districts have been drawn in the proposed maps just make for some crazy things. For example, I live in Clintonville in Columbus, which is a pretty, liberal Democratic area. And we have been drawn into Jim Jordan's district, as a way of neutralizing our vote. So, I think if we ended up with a map like that, people would rightfully feel very distressed that they weren't being able to elect somebody who would be their voice.
Testimony continued. You were among those who testified. I alluded to this earlier. Lawmakers now have until November 30th. What happens then?
Okay, so there's the November 30th is the deadline by which the General Assembly has to adopt a congressional map. It's a little bit unclear. Of course, this is the first time that we've actually done this process using the new rules. And so it mentions in the Constitution that there has to be a joint committee. The joint committee has been established. They're hearing testimony now. There's a hearing tomorrow. We assume that there will be hearings next week. But in the Constitution, it says that the joint committee will discuss a map. Right now, we have 4 maps that have been proposed: House Democratic, Senate Democratic,
House Republican and Senate Republican.
Right, exactly. So there's 4 maps, and we don't know which one they're going to adopt or they're going to propose, or is it going to be a completely different map? But it'll go through that committee, and then it'll have to be voted on by the House and the Senate. And
they will vote on a map. We have no idea which map. Well, we know this, Mia Lewis, the state legislative maps ended up in court. Can and will and maybe should that happen with these congressional district maps?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a difference. There's a possibility that they'll adopt a 10-year map and a possibility that they'll adopt a 4-year map. A 10-year map would require some buy-in by, I think, 30% of the minority party, so the Democrats at the Ohio in the General Assembly. If they can't get that, they can just do a majority vote and have a 4-year map. But that 4-year map has additional requirements. And one of the requirements is that it may not unduly favor one political party or another, and that you have to be able to say and show for the court why you made the decisions that you did and drew the lines where you did. So either, whether it's a 10-year map or a 4-year map, it could definitely end up in court, because we have part of the point of the redistricting reforms in 2018 was to establish rules such that they could be challenged in court.
Okay.
And yeah.
It's important stuff, folks. I know for some it's inside baseball. I find this fascinating, and I'm glad that voices like yours and others are being heard down there. If we really want to have people involved in the process, voters want to feel that their vote matters. And that can only happen if we have fair districts, in Jerry's humble opinion. Mia Lewis, thank you so very much for spending time with us. We'll continue to watch this issue. When I come back, in the wake of this year's elections, boy, some people are already writing the political obituary of the president of the United States. He's been in office less than 10 months. We're going to talk about that with a political scientist next on Leading Edge.